when we think about hiring, I think obviously culture is huge. And so how we do it here, oftentimes, but not always, just kind of depends on everything that we got going on. I try and do a vibe check and reach out to people and kind of have that first conversation to say, all right, what's going on? It may not be me, it may be somebody else on the team, but we're like, before we schedule an interview and you spend an hour of your time or more and get all ready and schedule things and maybe take off work or block your calendar, whatever those things are, I think a 10-15 minute conversation to be like, all right, this is us. This is the type of work. This is the type of role. The other thing I try to do, and I know you know this because we've interviewed quite a bit together, I want to scare people. I want to tell them the bad parts of the job, right? Like, I want you to come in totally prepared for our expectations. And so we talk about culture, and we talk a lot for us internally about Pat Lencioni and his books, and he talks about humble, hungry, and smart. And so if our organization really prizes these three things, I don't want somebody to come in and not expect that and be like, oh, huh, I didn't expect that this is what the culture was like, right? So we have a very flexible work-life balance, but that doesn't mean that we don't bust our butts when we're here, right? Like, I always say to my internal team, right? If our clients could do it just as good and in the same amount of time, they wouldn't hire us to do it. And so you have to be really clear about expectations, right? And this is kind of a leadership, but it's also a hiring. So if your expectation, for us, we track all of our time, and Michelle's like, yes, I know. And I tell people all the time, that's a hard part of the job. That is tough to swallow. If you have been a health plan investigator and you go into a consulting kind of role, which is what we're in, we track every hour that we spend on everything because we're billable to clients, and clients like that because I can be like, yes, we spent X amount on this, we did this on this, but that's not exactly fun from like a new hire perspective, or those of us that have been doing it for, in my case, for 15 years. I still don't love it, but it's part of the gig, right? So I think really very clearly having both the expectations outlined and the understanding of like, what is the role, what does it look like, and like the cultural expectations. And then also just being really upfront. I want to sell you on the good parts, but I'm not going to sweep under the rug the hard parts of the job, because I don't want you to find those out after you've been here for a few months. So I think to anybody that's looking to hire, and give people a chance. Just because they haven't done this job does not mean they can't do the job, but looking for the parts of maybe past roles that you've had, or that they have had, and trying to find skills in those past roles that might be applicable. And that also depends. If you're hiring one person in your 2-person SIU and you need them to do medical record reviews, you're probably not going to have the ability to train that person to do that work. But if I'm hiring my 5th, 6th, 7th med review, and I have a very strong team already, I can look for somebody that maybe they have the creds and they need an opportunity to prove themselves, right? Like, all of us have been in in those shoes where we are looking for an opportunity to shine, even if we are not a 30-year-long investigator. So I think a little bit of flexibility there would do well for hiring managers.
I like your thought process there. And I like what you're saying about the interviews. One thing I've noticed since entering the workforce just very few years ago, basically so recently, no, is I just feel like there's a lot more honesty in interviews now. I'm feeling that from the candidates, and I'm feeling it from being on the hiring side. And I really appreciate that. And I think that's really important, is like figure out what you can train, what you need that isn't really trainable. Like if you have a customer facing role or a sales role and you have a candidate who's like, in all honesty, I do not like to present, or it makes me very nervous, it gives me a ton of anxiety, try to avoid putting them in that position, even though you might want to push them for it or you like them in other respects, and just trying to figure out where and when you can take on training and enablement and like teaching, and where you can really say, all right, here are the baseline things that you need to be cool with. Maybe it's travel, maybe it's being in front of people, maybe it's sitting at your computer for a long time working in a spreadsheet alone. And trying to really figure out those candidates and like, who does that give energy to, and who does that take energy away from? And that's something we did this year to talk a little bit about Pat Lencioni again. He has this widget system, and it just made so much sense to me. We don't like work for him, or we're not getting commission for this, but I loved it. It's WIDGET, and it stands for wonder, invention, discernment, galvanizing, enablement, tenacity. And the concept of this is that there are like 6 pieces necessary for any business. And I'm going to say them really quickly. Wonder is like asking the big questions. Invention is like coming up with ideas for implementation. Discernment is like seeing if that idea is good, or if you think there's a lot of holes, or maybe it's not such a good idea. Galvanizing is getting people excited to do it. Enablement is coming alongside people who are already doing it and helping them. And then tenacity is seeing it through to fruition. And what he says is like, we are all people who have these skills in some respect and can do all of them, but some of them give us energy and some of them take energy away. And I'll say I'm really big into tenacity. I want to go through at the end and I want to finish a project. I don't care if it's boring. I don't care if it's tedious. I am so energized by checking that box at the end. And that's an important thing to know about myself. And that's an important thing for like my team to know about me. And there are some that really are the opposite. Discernment, if you give me a list of like 10 things that I need to make a decision on in a single day, by the end of that day, I'm going to feel like I worked 100 hours. So Jess, however, she can do that. And I can go to her and be like, here's the pros and here's the cons. What do you think? And in 30 seconds, she'll be like rattling off ideas and then being like, that was fun. What else? What other questions do you have for me? And kind of like figuring out when hiring, who do you need to have in the role? What skills do you think they need to possess? And like, are those skills, do those people have the skills that are going to give them that energy to make work feel fun and not like work? And are you giving them a role that fits with their personality, or is their personality fitting the role?
I could go on all day about this, and I love it. And I think what's cool about this one, although it's kind of a personality test, it's a little different from, they call it the working geniuses, for anybody that's like, oh, I want to read this or I want to roll it out to my team. We enjoyed it, and we're trying to not let it go like dormant, because we all did enjoy the exercise. And there are times that you're not going to be able to change somebody's duties to fit that. So wonder is like good for investigations, right? Like we kind of have to be asking those questions, but you also have to be able to make decisions. Like I think about like medical record review was the one that really stood out to me from an applicability in our roles. If you hate to make decisions, you literally line by line making a decision on whether something is supported based on a reg. And we all know that regs are not always black and white. There's some subjective criteria that are in these regulations, and how we interpret policies and that sort of thing. But I'm not a big T. Michelle is perfect for bringing my projects home. Like I love to start them. I can discern. I want to help you with them, but like the getting it through the finish line is tiring for me. So it's not that I can't do it. And again, I think Michelle, you articulated this perfect. It's really not that you can or cannot do these things, but it's like, what do you do well and you get energy from, right? And who doesn't want to be energized by the work that they're doing? And I loved that you said, can they sit and spend half their day in a spreadsheet by themselves? And Michelle, as our data manager, definitely has to do that. So if you hate that, that's going to be super hard.
Right.
That's
It's
great.
so funny to have 2 people who can do the same thing. And one person's like, oh my gosh, I figured all this stuff out today with all this data and I made all these charts and I have insight and I want to share it with you. And you might have another one who's like, I need to put on a podcast and I'm going to try to figure this out. But whew, man, I can't wait till my next meeting.
Absolutely.